Hello and welcome. Today we are gathered to hear from the legal counsel and plaintiffs of the 4 cases that arose from the police violence directed at residents and protesters in West Philadelphia in the I-676 highway during peaceful protests in 2020. We ask that you keep all questions until the conclusion of remarks. And lastly, we'd like to thank the Paul Robeson House and Museum for hosting us today. First, we will hear from the Smith Group, and that includes Charles McLaurin, Amelia Carter, Nia Holston, and Karen McClellan.
Good morning. In July of 2020, the Legal Defense Fund, along with our co-counsel, filed a lawsuit on behalf of residents in a predominantly black neighborhood in West Philadelphia. The lawsuit challenged the Philadelphia Police Department's use of excessive and unwarranted militaristic force during a peaceful protest. This was all set against the backdrop of nationwide protests against police violence and other attacks against black people. Like countless communities around the country, West Philadelphians engaged in peaceful protest, advocating for systemic reforms to change unconstitutional policing after the murder of George Floyd. The irony is that the police department responded to protests of police brutality, racial discrimination, and excessive force with further brutality, discrimination, and excessive force, terrorizing bystanders and residents with military-style weapons. There should be no place for militarizing a police department that is supposed to serve its citizens. Now, monetary compensation is an important step, but it does not represent full accountability for the harm that occurred. The city still has not given directly impacted residents from the 52nd Street corridor a simple apology, nor has it properly acknowledged the egregious acts that took place on May 31st, 2020. True healing cannot begin until the city takes full accountability. With that being said, we believe that today's settlement represents a long overdue and frank recognition of the stark violence that police inflicted on West Philadelphia residents and protesters. The settlement also recognizes the continued significance of their calls for racial justice and police accountability. We hope that today's settlement provides a measure of healing for those harmed by police violence in 2020 and beyond. Thank you. My name is Charles McLaurin, and I am a senior counsel with the Legal Defense Fund. Spelled M as in mother, C-L-A-U-R-I-N as in Nancy, McLaurin.
Hi, my name is Amelia Carter. I am a plaintiff in this case. Instead of protecting us, the Philadelphia Police Department waged war in our streets. By blanketing a community in tear gas, they haphazardly attacked law-abiding citizens. They haphazardly attacked law-abiding citizens in our homes and on our sidewalks. There is no place for the militarization of a police department that is supposed to serve us. The settlement's disengagement from the 1033 program, which arms law enforcement with military equipment, is a welcome start that prioritizes our safety. It represents a significant stride in preventing the police department from being granted the authority to act against its own citizens in the future. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Nia Holston, last name spelled Holston, and I am a staff attorney with the Abolitionist Law Center based here in Philly. And I want to start by acknowledging the social movements in Philadelphia and the long-standing Black radical tradition that motivated us to take up this fight. Litigation is but one tool to achieve change, and we are continually inspired by the power of collective action and the strength of West Philly residents who have encountered disinvestment, state aggression, and violence, and we will continue to fight for change. As a part of this agreement, the city has affirmed that it has ended its participation in the 1033 program. This is a federal program that allowed the Department of Defense to give state, local, and federal law enforcement agencies military hardware, including combat vehicles, rifles, and other weapons that have been used to wage violence against Black communities in police raids and to engage in police violence against folks, even those who are protesting police violence. It is up to the residents to hold the city to its pledges and to honor those who have been harmed. Furthermore, the Philadelphia Police Department will now be required to report on their use of force against West Philly communities and to answer to those who they have harmed about how they will disengage from that use of force in the future. The city will be required to bring data to the community, and the community can hold them accountable for what that data shows. And while we celebrate this victory, we also recognize that the work is far from over. This settlement is only a small part of a long and difficult struggle for racial justice and an end to police violence against Black communities. And we must continue to utilize the tools that we have to fight for change, and we must continue to hold those in power accountable. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Kara McClellan. I'm the director of the Advocacy for Racial and Civil Justice Clinic. On May 31st, 2020, Philadelphia residents took to the street in protest of Mr. George Floyd's murder and the police killings of countless other Black people. Tragically, police responded to protesters with excessive force and the very brutality that had led people to protest in the first place. Over the course of the day, the Philadelphia Police Department's use of tear gas and other military-style weapons turned the residential area surrounding 52nd Street into something resembling a war zone. Often legal settlements come in the form of compensating a harmed person without accounting for the trauma and damage that police violence does to the entire community. This settlement is unique in that in addition to $9.25 million in individual damages, it includes a commitment to direct an additional $500,000 toward a grant for culturally responsive mental health and wellness services and other community-based programming. The grant will be administered by Bread and Roses Community Fund and led by a committee made up of people who are directly impacted by the events of May 31st, 2020, and West Philadelphia residents. If you would like to receive more information about the West Philadelphia Community Fund grant, you can do so at breadrosesfund.org. Our hope is that today's settlement sets an important precedent for police accountability to the community in future cases. Thank you.
Now we will have the Welch group, Jonathan Feinberg and Ed Parker.
Good morning, and thank you all for being here. My name is Jonathan Feinberg, Feinberg. I am an attorney with the Philadelphia civil rights law firm of Kairys, Rudovsky, Messing, Feinberg, and Lin. I am co-counsel with the attorneys who you just heard from in the Smith versus City of Philadelphia litigation, and additionally, my firm represents 80 plaintiffs in a case called Welch versus City of Philadelphia. Every single one of those 80 plaintiffs was subjected to tear gassing and other abuse on June 1st, 2020, while engaged in peaceful political demonstration against police violence on Interstate 676. I'd like to make note of 3 points this morning. First, today is a day to honor the bravery and courage of the clients we represent. The 80 people who are plaintiffs in the Welch case only became plaintiffs because they decided to raise their voices against systemic police violence. In return, they were subjected to the very conduct against which they were demonstrating. Rather than stop their advocacy, they chose to speak out even more by bringing this lawsuit. Throughout, they have told deeply personal stories about the trauma they faced. And it is only through their willingness to do so that we are in a position today to announce this result. Second, today is a day to honor the collaboration and skill of more than 20 lawyers and law students who joined forces to bring these various cases. I've practiced as a civil rights lawyer in this city for more than 20 years, and have throughout that time marveled not only at the passion within this community to advocate for necessary systemic reform within the criminal justice system, but also at the spirit of cooperation that informs massive efforts like what occurred in these cases. Finally, today is a day to recognize that while these cases have produced an admirable result, our job is far from over. Police violence and resistance to protest has a long and sordid history in the city of Philadelphia. We are fooling ourselves if we think that one set of lawsuits will bring an end to that history. These settlements are a significant step, but there is more, much more, that needs to be done. I, for one, am comforted in knowing that the people who brought these lawsuits and the lawyers who assisted them in doing so are engaged in these ongoing efforts. Thank you once again for being here, and I would like to introduce my client, Ed Parker, who will speak on behalf of the Welch plaintiffs.
Hello, my name is Ed. I was one of those detained on 676. It seems our mistake was asking for the PPD to live up to their mission statement instead of celebrating a local sporting victory. Their mission statement suggests that they should have been fighting the fear of crime and terrorism, not providing us real-world examples in our streets and in our homes. Enforcing laws while safeguarding our constitutional rights, not simultaneously violating both. Providing quality service to residents, not lacrimation agents and kinetically energized batons. My injury endangered my career in public service, and I will bear the physical and psychological scars my entire life. Zip-tie cuffs damaged my wrist, causing me to lose strength in my hand, and I had to go into the knife 3 times to correct it, with no guarantee that the injury won't reoccur. I had the privilege of being CS gassed as part of my training for Uncle Sam, but hearing the choking, weeping, and people calling out for their loved ones was something else entirely. They made sure one of the first things they did was to rip off our masks and then subsequently stuff us on buses and in cells together. This was June of 2020, and the pandemic implications of which should not be underplayed. The absurdity of being the subject of police brutality during a protest against police brutality was not lost on us. These are just small parts of one person's story. A lot of the threads were added to the tapestry of police brutality and brought together by the weft of the PPD's actions. Another series of unfortunate events that hopefully motivates workers and historically marginalized people to engage more in the political aspect of our society and build stronger solidarity with each other. This settlement has shown me that change is possible and the system has the resources to do so. We just have to ensure they keep taking these steps while we work to transform the aspects of society that cause the conditions we protest. Peace to you if you're willing to fight for it.
Now we will have the Zolotar group, including William Hough and Aaron Zeger.
Good morning, and thank you for coming today. I'm William Hosey, and with me is my colleague, Arthur Manahor, my client, Aaron Zager. Arthur and I are with the Cohen, Swift & Graff firm here in Philadelphia. Today, we would like to give thanks to those whose efforts over the past 2.5 years resulted in the settlement with the city that we're here to talk about today. We start by recognizing the plaintiffs who were stirred to exercise their constitutional right to free speech, to peaceably assemble, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances, and who thereafter had the gumption to take legal action when their exercise of these rights was violently and unlawfully abridged. Thanks also to Judge Strawbridge and his clerk Aaron Hills and his staff for skillfully and patiently mediating the claims of hundreds of plaintiffs and guiding the parties to settlement. Thank you also to the city's attorneys who professionally negotiated a fair and reasonable resolution of the plaintiffs' cases. Last but not least, I want to thank the other plaintiffs' counsel. I apologize in advance if I leave anyone out. Jonathan Feinberg and Susan Lin of Kairys, Rudovsky, Messing, Feinberg and Lin, Kara McClellan and Rachel Kleinman of the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund, Kevin Mincy and Riley Ross of Mincy Fitzpatrick Ross LLC, Paul Hetznicker of Paul Hetznicker Esquire, Marnie Jo Snyder of the law offices of M.J. Snyder LLC, Michael Corad of Michael Corad Esquire, and Brett Grote of the Abolitionist Law Center. These accomplished attorneys who had filed separate lawsuits on behalf of people harmed by the actions of the police on May 31 and June 1, 2020, welcomed my firm into the fold, and thereafter plaintiff's counsel worked together as a team. Together, we advanced the interests of every plaintiff and achieved an excellent result for our clients. And we believe for those who in the future seek to peacefully exercise their constitutional rights in this great city. It's my pleasure to introduce Aaron Zager, our client and one of the plaintiffs in this lawsuit, who also had the courage to come forward and file a case and whose contributions to the mediation helped bring about the settlement. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Erin Zegar. My fiance and I were protesting on June 1st. I think about June 1st daily. It was chaos and pain like I personally have never experienced. And then after being tear gassed, pepper sprayed, shot at with rubber bullets, it was an incredible slap to the face to watch the city deny accountability over and over and over again. And today I thank the city for admitting wrongdoing through the settlement, but I hope that future administrations are more willing to discuss the reforms necessary to ensure Philadelphia's citizens' rights are protected and that any abusers of power are held accountable. Thank you.
And lastly, we will have the Huff group, which includes Paul Hetznicker, Kevin Mincy, Riley Ross, Marnie Jo Snyder, Anya Fox, Michael Coard, and Gwen Snyder.
Good morning. My name is Paul Hetznicker, and I have been a practicing criminal defense and civil rights lawyer in the city of Philadelphia for the last 35 years. I'm proud to stand here and representing the largest group of plaintiffs, 240 plaintiffs, representing clients both from West Philadelphia as well as on I-676 in the Parkway, harmed by the brutal violence and paramilitary attack conducted by the Philadelphia Police Department on May 31st and June 1st, 2020. I want to start out by saying the murder of George Floyd ignited or reignited an examination of the racist institutional police culture throughout this country and this city. There's a long-standing brutal history of police abuse in this city. It represents, unfortunately, a legacy of violence that has affected black and brown communities all too often and all more frequently than other communities. Following the protests on June 1st and the attack on May 31st, I reached out to colleagues and friends, Michael Cord and Marnie Snyder, both of whom assisted me, and we worked together during the Occupy Philly representation over a decade ago. I reached out to Kevin Mincy and Riley Ross, both experienced criminal defense and civil rights lawyers, and we together as a group represent the 240 plaintiffs who were harmed by the brutal paramilitary attacks that occurred on those 2 days. For the first time in 40 years, as I recollect as an activist, a young activist, as a teenager in Philadelphia, as a legal observer during my experience as a law student, and then again as representing protesters throughout the course of my career, I looked at the attacks that occurred, and it is reminiscent of what occurred 40 years ago. Because for the first time in 40 years, the Philadelphia Police Department used tear gas on peaceful protesters. This power must not go unchecked. It must be confronted. And our answer to that unchecked power were the lawsuits and the settlement that we announced here today. This is the largest settlement in a mass protest case in the history of Philadelphia. And I'm proud to say that we worked well with all of the other legal teams to come about, to get this settlement to come about. I also want to talk a little bit about the history of the brutality in Philadelphia. This goes way back. So as documented by journalists, human rights activists, by government officials, the history of brutality and the culture of brutality in the Philadelphia Police Department is longstanding and well understood. What we need is democratic accountability. This lawsuit is the first step towards that accountability. The decision by all of our clients to express their First Amendment rights on the streets of Philadelphia, or for the residents who were harmed here in West Philadelphia, to bring this lawsuit is a courageous decision. It's a decision that they collectively decided not only to compensate for the harms that they suffered, but also to take that first step towards accountability and transparency. Police departments in this country must be tethered to the democratic process. That requires a changing of the police culture. The discontinuation of the 1033 program is just one step in this effort to shift the warrior police model away from the police culture that's entrenched into a new and enlightened engagement with the public. That starts with legislative measures. It starts with the Citizens Police Oversight Commission established by the City of Philadelphia City Council so that they can conduct real oversight with subpoena power, with the ability to investigate not only broad swaths of misconduct, but individual cases as well. Our goal is to assist in that process because real reform can only come about, as I said, with democratic control. So as we think about the brutality and the history of this city that the police force has levied against the general public and protesters in particular, we have to think forward and push back against the unending power that the police department has exhibited in this city. So I want to talk a little bit about the Huff team, and then I'm going to turn it over to the rest of my teammates. Shortly after the events that occurred on May 31st and June 1st, I reached out to my colleagues here with the great experience that they have, and we combined forces and we put together this lawsuit. As I said, this lawsuit combines not only residents of West Philadelphia, but the protesters on 676. The efforts that we need to make in changing the culture within the police department begin with some of the statements and some of the suggestions that my colleagues will offer in the next few minutes. So with that, I turn it over to Kevin Mincy. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Paul. Good morning, everybody. My name is Kevin Mincy. I'm a partner at Mincy Fitzpatrick Ross, a civil rights law firm in Philadelphia, and it's an honor to be here today. Really an honor to have worked with so many great lawyers on this litigation, and a privilege to be a part of impact litigation like this. I'd be remiss if I didn't take the time to thank, not just the folks who were plaintiffs in our cases, but really all of the people who stood up in the late spring of 2020 to speak out against the unlawful killing of black people by police officers all around the country. It was their courage that really inspired us to become a part of this case. When you see so many people who are willing to stand up and have their voice heard for people who look like me and Riley, so that people who look like me and Riley can live without fear, hopefully one day, of being killed by the police. It's a really inspiring thing, and really we felt it was our duty to get involved in this case. And so we're really, really honored to be here. It's easy to look at the final dollar amount and say, okay, this is resolution for the case is over. But for three of the Huff plaintiffs, the fight for justice continues. Many of you will remember that there were three individuals seated on the highway who were sprayed in the face with tear gas by former officer Richard Nicoletti. That criminal case is still ongoing. Our clients have been and will continue to be ready to testify when called upon. We look forward to walking with them as they seek full justice in this matter. I would say that throughout the course of our investigation in litigating this case, we uncovered hundreds of videos from the 676 area during the protest. Many of the videos showed clearly officers taking aim at Mr. Huff, shooting at Mr. Huff directly, and we know that Mr. Huff was shot in the back multiple times by rubber bullets as he fled the highway. We have turned that video over to the district attorney's office. We renew our call today for the district attorney's office to find and identify those police officers who we can clearly see in those videos and bring them to the same type of justice they seek for former officer Nicoletti. And with that, I'll turn it over to my partner, Riley Ross.
Good morning, everyone. Riley Ross, with a partner with Mincy Fitzpatrick Ross, and just like my colleagues, I want to thank our clients for giving me the privilege to represent them. I also want to thank my colleagues not only on the Huff team, but also across the 4 lawsuits for their tremendous work in making this lawsuit come about. I believe that everything happens for a reason and in the time that it's supposed to happen, and it's very fitting that this lawsuit comes at a time when our city leaders and our would-be or want-to-be city leaders are actually calling for more police, calling for larger police budgets, and even calling for a return for stop and frisk. Well, I want to stand up here and ask that those running for mayor and those running for city council denounce the calls for a return to stop and frisk. And if they don't denounce those returns, then they explain to us, to the people of Philadelphia, what has changed within the police department to justify giving police more power over us.